I'm Claire Dooley. You're watching CHGTV, and this is the Geoengineering Report, where we identify the threat in the skies. From toxic wildfires to dying marine life, ecosystems are collapsing in plain sight, but corporate media tells us everything's fine. As government agencies downplay the damage, the skies tell a different story. Our expert Dane Wigington reveals how atmospheric aerosol operations and engineered weather events are accelerating climate collapse, while the public is kept pacified.
Planet on Fire. I watched that video, Planet on Fire. So it was petrifying. So tell me why this is not mainstream news. Why are the weather channels not reporting what you are finding?
Because it's their job to not report what's actually happening on the front lines. It's their job to keep the public pacified until the last possible moment, until the moment of impact, to keep business as usual until that point, to feed normalcy bias. And that's exactly what they're doing. The public's all too happy to go along with that. With electronic devices, they occupy their time with football games, bread and circus till the brutal bitter end, Polly. But that needs to change. If we're to have any chance of salvaging anything for anyone pressing onto the future, we need to deal with what's happening right now. And there's not enough people willing to do that. That needs to change. It's going to take all of us to do that. And again, people underestimate their own personal power in this equation. They think they don't have a voice. But if you share credible data from a credible source and share with those around you, ask them to do the same. If we can force the true gravity of what's unfolding to the full light of day, we would cause a shockwave around the globe. And that starts with the single most destructive human activity of all ever deployed by our species. That's happening in our skies. That's climate engineering operations, which involves the saturation of the atmosphere with toxic particulate matter. And that bleeds into other areas, which is triggering fires. You guys know about the smoke situation right now happening from Canada. We have the quote Sahara dust coming from the other side of the pond. And neither of these items are, or these scenarios are just what we're told. There's massive amounts of climate engineering aerosol spraying being intermingled into all of this. So it's quite a toxic brew, Polly.
You talk about climate collapse, and there are so many people with high qualifications in our movement that say this is utter nonsense.
Yeah, that's truly perplexing when they recognize the utter nonsense of the battle they're focused on, the quote, safe and effective medical treatments, that is utter nonsense as well. They deny this issue, which is perplexing to us. It's truly perplexing because it's not like we're speculating or theorizing or hypothesizing. We have hard frontline data of total collapse from insect populations to whales. I don't know, have you seen how many whales are dying on the West Coast now?
Yeah.
They're everywhere. And you have beaches around the globe, from Australia to Scotland, Europe, covered with marine life. We have fisheries collapsing, and yet you have people that pretend that they're in alt media, that they're addressing the truth that mainstream media won't tell us, and yet they're propagating the exact same denial that's being pushed by the power structure. That's really perplexing to us. And extreme examples of that are, again, I know we visited this before to a degree, but when we have blizzards in New Orleans and Florida, which we had earlier this year, while it's above freezing and raining in most of the polar regions, nobody reports on that. They simply focus on these freak chemically nucleated flash snowstorms happening in parts of the US that are sensationalized by matrix media. So again, the climate engineering operations are so many things, none of them benevolent. We have a targeting of agricultural regions. We certainly have biological experimentation going on with these operations as well. So again, the gravity of the threat posed by what's happening in our skies cannot be overstated. If we don't deal with it, all other causes, all other concerns will very, very soon be moot points, Polly.
And how serious is this? Is this the greatest natural security threat we have right now?
Yes, and this is a matter of record as well, Polly. The U.S. military stating emphatically on the record that they consider the collapsing climate system to be the greatest national security threat of all. Are we really to think that they're not going to engage in climate engineering operations, which are a matter of historical record for 75 plus years, starting with the manipulation of hurricanes after World War II, Project Cirrus, Project Popeye in Vietnam? We have countries around the globe announcing that they are engaged in weather modification programs like the United Arab Emirates, Of course, our military is neck deep in these operations. It's absolutely ludicrous to think otherwise. We have documents like Owning the Weather in 2025, U.S. military document, and we're there, aren't we, at 2025. We have the Chinese government stating the same emphatically on the record. They're engineering everything from winter snowstorms to eliminating precipitation over certain events like the Olympics. You remember that, right? Chinese government announced that don't worry about the rain, we'll make sure it doesn't. Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
So when we have these events like the Palisades fires, Lahaina, now Canada burning again, at absolute minimum, if there was any motivation by those in power to use this covert weapon, which they now wield, to make sure that these areas didn't burn or there was enough precipitation over them, if they were so effective at controlling precipitation in the 60s, are we to think they couldn't do the same now with that many more decades of technology behind them? Of course they could. Again, this is peer-reviewed study. We have under the engineering wildfire section at geoengineeringwatch.org, we have documents like forest fires as a military weapon, 140-page U.S. military document. We have another very important report, Wildfires Serve Geoengineering Agenda, that shows the actual science studies and reports that advocate for the intentional burning of northern latitude forests to provide temporary cooling for other regions. And that is exactly what's happening now again. 2023, remember the fires that happened then, Polly? The Canadian fires? And most people don't know how much actually burned. It's about 72,000 square miles, not 72,000 acres, 72,000 square miles, larger than the states of Florida or Georgia. And that provided temporary cooling. For those in power, it not only provides temporary cooling, masks the true severity of damage done to the climate while paradoxically at the same time inflicting even more damage, but it's also sickening and dumbing down populations because that particulate matter, much of it ends up in our brains. And we now have, Polly, recent study. Do you remember the leaded gas, the lead that used to be in gas? Do you remember that in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and even into part of the 90s? Now we have peer-reviewed study that was just published that lead lowered IQs up 6 points plus for those that were exposed to that constantly. Can you imagine that? Do you think those in power don't know that? That lead lowered the IQs of populations across the board dramatically. Now we have peer-reviewed study to prove that there's a synergistic toxicity between that lead and aluminum. And we all have aluminum in us now because it's a primary element in climate engineering patents. And we have peer-reviewed study to prove there's synergistic toxicity between aluminum and mercury, two of the elements that are in the, quote, safe and effective medical treatments, right? Which aren't. So again, from every conceivable direction, those in power know exactly what they're doing. They're using weather as not only a weapon, but biological warfare along with that, Polly.
We love hearing from you at CHGTV. We always are going through your emails and, sending them to each other and discussing the pictures you're sending and, whatever comments you're making. So please continue doing so. You can reach out to us at goodmorning@chg.tv. Thank you so much for watching the Geoengineering Report.